This has been a very dark week in human history. Amid economic turmoil around the world, a global pandemic, and the ongoing climate crisis, for the first time since World War II, war has come to Europe. Ukraine, a modern democratic European nation, has been invaded by Russian forces. Adults, men and women alike, are being faced with the choice to flee their homes with only a few suitcases, the clothes on their backs, and their loved ones, or to stay behind, to choose to fight back actively, to stand up to one of the largest armies in the world with hunting rifles and Molotov cocktails, or to commit to years of sabotage. A list has been reportedly created by the Kremlin of reporters, LGBTQ plus activists, and just openly living persons. Politicians, religious leaders, and others will face imprisonment, torture, and execution if or when Ukraine falls to the Russian forces. Everyday people, our siblings across the sea, are pinning notes to their children with their blood types and their names in the desperate hopes that if they are injured, at least they might be saved by having the right transfusion. They're huddling in their basements and in subway stations, hoping that as bombing rains above, they might be saved. And yet, in our churches today, we read the story of the Transfiguration, of Jesus being transformed, and of meeting with Elijah and Moses on the mountaintop. We read of Moses being transformed by meeting with God. We read words of hope and joy in a time of darkness and despair. And these words seem naive and disjointed from the reality we are facing. What do the experiences of Moses, Jesus, Elijah, Peter, James, and John have to do with what we are facing today? Well, here's the thing. In the Synoptic Gospels, that is, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, immediately after the Transfiguration, Jesus, Peter, James, and John come down from the mountain, and they begin their journey towards Jerusalem and towards the crucifixion. James, John, and Peter wanted to stay on the mountaintop. They wanted to continue to live in the glory of God's radiance, to take up their camp and welcome pilgrims. But it was not reality. The time on the mountaintop, including the Transfiguration, was a time of retreat, of preparation, and of recommitment for Jesus to face what was to come. In like manner, Moses' experience on the mountaintop, conversing directly with God, was important preparation. But if Moses had stayed up there, the Torah would never have been given to the people. We need these mountaintop times, or what is to come can become overwhelming. But we cannot live on the mountaintop. We need to come down and turn those preparations into reality. This is why we need this time each and every Sunday to attend services together, to remind ourselves why we do what we do, to call ourselves back to our mission, to reinforce our commitment to follow Christ in the way. But being Christian is not about these times that we are together. Rather, it is about what we do when we leave these doors and these computer screens. It's about how we care for one another, how we face challenges that are too big for us to take on alone, and how we stand up for the least among us. Now, February is Black History Month, and I would be negligent if I did not at least once in this month bring forward the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, many of you lived through the civil rights era as an adult or at least as a child, but for me, it was a history in a textbook. And that era was very much boiled down to Jim Crow was a Southern phenomenon. One day, Rosa Parks sat at the front of the bus. Dr. King marched on Washington and gave his I Have a Dream speech. Dr. King and President Johnson met together, and then civil rights legislation was passed, and we have all lived in racial harmony ever after, though one very sick man killed Dr. King. Now, there are many flaws in this little fairy tale that I was spoon-fed as a child, not the least of which is the downplaying of violence against activists of all races and ethnicities, and against everyday Black people trying to live their lives throughout American history. But that set aside, when Reverend Dr. King was assassinated, he was not marching for civil rights in the conventional sense. He was marching for the rights of sanitation workers. He was in Memphis to march with garbage collectors, sewer maintenance workers, and street cleaners to be paid just wages, to have safe working conditions, and to be treated with the respect due workers who ensured that basic sanitation was available to the people of Memphis. And the night before he died, he gave a speech, which, if you have a chance this week, I really encourage you to read in its entirety. And let me leave you this morning with the final words from that speech, as they spoke to me in a new way during this great darkness, as I try to meditate on the Transfiguration. And knowing that these were the last words that this great man spoke publicly. We've got difficult days ahead, but it doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm happy. Tonight, I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Amen.